she was willing to give her palace. Oh, hello guys! Welcome back to part 2. My video naturally cuts the video. My video recorder cuts the roughly every half an hour, cuts the video into up into pieces, so it's easier to upload. We're talking about Freya, okay? And in part 1, we were just talking about how Freya had discovered the necklace that the Brisling brothers had produced, a golden necklace of sublime beauty but incredible power. And I was saying, I don't know what power that necklace had, and I wouldn't guess what power it had, but its power must have been immense, and its beauty must have been sublime, because Freya offered the Brisling brothers everything she possessed. Everything, literally everything. Her palace, the field, all her gold, all her material possessions could have been theirs. She would have traded everything for this one single necklace. But they refused her offer. Instead, they said, the only way that we'll have this necklace is if that you spend one night with each of us. And she immediately accepted. But see, she was the god of sex, and for her, having sex wasn't necessarily adultery to her, even though it was adultery to Odin, who she was married to, or Odir as he was known. Freya was supposed to be married to Odir, but Odir is a variation of Odin. Okay, it was Odin and Freya just trying to have a secret marriage, essentially. It was a marriage of convenience, but neither one really wanted to admit their marriage to one another, for whatever reasons. But even though it was adultery, I think because the fact that their marriage was that of convenience, it was a marriage to prevent war between Vanheim and Asgard again. As I say, neither realm really got on with one another. The Innengard don't tolerate the Isengard, and the Isengard, they tolerate the Innengard, but they don't give a shit about the Innengard. And if they get attacked, or they just feel like one day, oh, you know what, the Innengard are in our way, they'll get rid of them. So it was a marriage of convenience, and it meant eternity of peace. Okay, and so for her to have sex with these 4 dwarfs was, to her, nothing. It didn't matter that she was committing adultery, and so she did it. And in return for having sex with the 4 dwarfs, she received this necklace. I don't know if it has a name. I never found out. I couldn't find the name of the necklace, but the necklace that she has is something of an immense power. We're talking on the same sort of power lines as Odin's spear or Thor's hammer, Mjolnir. Okay, we really are talking something incredibly powerful. So maybe put it in the comment section beneath what you think the power of the necklace is, either jokingly or seriously. It might mean eternal youth, pretty useless to a god. So I can't really be that. It might be literally immortality, true immortality, i.e. not even a god can kill you, because gods can die. But if she's like wearing this necklace, maybe she can never die. And we'll see that later when I talk about Ragnarok. Okay? Now, the necklace was not the only thing that she had that was of value or of interest. She did have certain other items. Let me just double check my notes quickly. Right, so it wasn't other items. She had one other item beyond her chariot of cats. A chariot being pulled by 2 cats. That might be perhaps one of the most interesting items around. But the other item that she had, and she did actually loan this item out from time to time to the other gods, specifically Loki, actually, so that he could go about committing his mischief without anyone knowing, was a cloak of falcon feathers. okay, and she used to wear it, and the cloak allowed her to fly. So Freya could actually fly. She could fly in human form, but interestingly, she could also turn into a falcon herself. It gave her the ability to polymorph, something that only the giants normally could do. The giants were very good at polymorphing, but none of the other tribes of gods were very good at changing form. And this allowed her, this cloak of falcon feathers, allowed her to turn perfectly into that of a falcon. She didn't need to, because she could fly without turning into a falcon, but she could turn into a falcon if she wished. And what's interesting about it is that the cloak of feathers, most of the time, did not spend its time as a cloak. It spent its time as a raven. So as a falcon. Okay, so it didn't spend most of its time as just a simple cloak of falcon feathers on her back. It actually spent most of its time on her shoulder as a falcon, watching over her anyone approaching her and watching for her enemies. Now, I forgot to mention one last thing before I go on to sort of war and death, because she was obviously a goddess of war and death, and that's very important because that will lead on to Ragnarok. It's a sort of natural progression when you're talking about war and death, how that then takes you on to Ragnarok, okay? And the one thing that I forgot to mention, despite writing it in my notes, was magic. Okay, now I've mentioned before, she was very powerful, Freya, at magic, or she is very powerful. So I don't believe Ragnarok's happened yet. Some people believe Ragnarok's actually already occurred, but there we go. I don't believe Ragnarok's occurred yet. When I say she was powerful, I mean she was incredibly powerful at magic. And in my study, I discovered that she's even more powerful at magic than what I could have even imagined. She was not only a shaman, so had shaman-like magic that she could use. She was not only the foremost practitioner of shamanism, sorcery, Seder. Okay, Seder magic was all about the fates. She was literally the foremost practitioner of every type of magic you can think of, other than possibly necromancy. As I say, that's the one thing that I can't think of. But what's interesting is I would actually describe her as not just a practitioner of magic, but actually as either being just really powerful with magic, but being magic. Now that might sound strange, but she was the goddess of love, war, beauty, gold, sex, death, and magic. But what if she was magic? Now you might say, well, hey, you can't be just the god of magic and be magic. The reason without reason, without example, the reason I say this is because she had the power, and I've written it down here. Okay, several examples of what she did, or threatened to do from time to time. She had the ability, so basically when gods came to Midgard, they could do it through several ways. They could come down by the Bifrost as themselves, okay? Or they could come attached to a human being that was one of their own, that belonged to them. Typically, they could attach themselves to a human that didn't belong to them, but the binding was not as strong, and the human could try to resist them to some extent. It wasn't as pleasant an experience for the god. And they did this through the power of Weird, okay, W-Y-R-D, which was just magic. That's the old word for magic, okay? So they used magic or sorcery. They used sorcery. All gods had some ability with sorcery, okay, to basically possess, essentially, what we would describe today. It's not the same, but what we would describe today as demonic possession. But instead of being possessed by a demon, you're possessed by a god. and especially if you're willing to be possessed, you're possessed by God, and when they leave you, literally, you are unharmed by the process. They will not harm your body when they're in there. Obviously, if you go and, someone attacks you, and the God's got a lot of powers to protect himself, chances are you're not going to get hurt. But say that God gets attacked by another God and takes a battering, and when it leaves your body, you are going to be injured, okay? But most of the time, when the gods came down, they did come down attached to, not via the Bifrost, but they came down by the weird, because it allowed them to do it much more incognito, more than anything else, and it allowed them to walk Midgard without being recognised, because people would have recognised their gods, believe it or not, or other gods walking Midgard at the time would have recognised them, each other, of course. They go, hang on a minute, that's Thor over there. But let's say Thor comes down using the weird, but Loki doesn't. Loki comes down. Thor will be like, hang on a minute, that's Loki over there. What's he doing? And he'll be able to watch him. And Loki would not recognise Thor, because of course Thor would just look like a human. Because he would be a human in theory, human with godlike powers. But so it's interesting that obviously the gods were able to come down and essentially possess human beings. Now, Freya was the one and only god or goddess within the pantheon of Viking of the Nordic people that was able to just completely sever that ability for any god, completely to sever the line that of the flowing weird that allowed that god to possess the human and send them straight back to Asgard. Okay. She had that ability to not just cut it off when they were using it, but also just to cut it off completely, like turning a faucet on a tap. She could turn off the flow of weird, and could turn sorcery off. She could turn magic off, literally, and prevent any god, every single god, not even Odin himself, who was a very powerful practitioner of magic himself, was able to overcome this. She could just turn magic off. That was it. She could continue using it if she wanted to, because she could allow it to flow through her. But no other person other than her could use magic if she wanted it, and she did it in a few sagas. Where she just goes, okay, fine. And there was in one particular saga, where Odin was basically being stubborn and going, no, I'm going down. And he attached himself to a human that belonged to him, a berserker. Okay, now berserkers belong to Odin. That's their patron god. There's no doubt about it. They're completely dedicated to Odin. So not only would the human try to cling on to Odin to hold him in, but Odin would have incredible strength and ability and incredible affinity for that person's body that has been sort of prepared its entire life to receive Odin within it. She just flipped the switch, and he was forced out of that body instantly. There wasn't even a fight. So she was incredibly powerful with magic, incredibly powerful. She could also not only just turn off sorcery, which is essentially shamanism, okay? She could also completely turn off Seder also. So, and she did do. There were sometimes Seder rituals. Seder magic was a form of magic that focused upon changing fate. Okay, changing either what was going to happen in the future, what's happening in the present, or what happened in the past. And it was all about changing the flow of fate. If you change the flow of fate in a certain way, you would get certain results. You would end up with a more favourable fate, the fate that you desired. Then if you're particularly good with Seder magic, you could basically give yourself the life that you wanted, whatever life it would be. Okay, within a reason, of course. Destiny is destiny. You can't escape Ragnarok. You would die during Ragnarok. If you were destined to die during Ragnarok, you would die during Ragnarok. There's nothing you can do about that. But up to that point, up to the day that you're supposed to die, ultimately, or some particularly big event like that, you could use Seder magic to better your life to no limit whatsoever. And she had the ability to completely end Seder rituals immediately, just like bang, flick of a finger. She didn't even physically be at the ritual. Say a Seder magic user was Seder magic was used by humans as well as gods. So say a god was practicing Seder magic, let's say Odin, because Odin was one of the few that used Seder magic, was using Seder magic to change fate, and she, in her benevolence, knew, because she was more powerful and more knowledgeable with regard to Seder magic than Odin. And Odin was very knowledgeable and powerful with Seder magic. I'm not saying he was weak, but he wasn't as good as Freya. But let's say he was doing something, and what he was going to do was going to change fate in a way that might work for him, might even stop Ragnarok, but might make things bad for Freya. Well, Freya, bang, would flip the switch, and the ritual would just end. Literally, the flow of magic that allowed Seder to work just stopped, and you couldn't influence fate anymore. Fate would just continue flowing as it should have, and it would all unravel, and any progress you'd made in the ritual in changing fate would just reverse itself instantly, and it would go back to how fate should have been. So she had incredible power regards her magical abilities, and that's why I say that she wasn't just the goddess of magic, or one of the gods of magic. She was magic, because who can turn off magic? If you're a god who can use magic, then yeah, that's great. You're a god of magic. But if you can turn magic on and off, then surely you're more than that. You're not just a god who can use magic. You are magic, and you're just allowing the other gods to use your abilities when they're practicing their magical rituals. And if you can have power even over other gods, not just mortals, gods themselves, including Odin, who was incredibly wise and powerful and knowledgeable, you could just go, no, stop, and stop immediately in their tracks. Literally, with no argument, no fight, no resistance. You could just turn it off instantly like that. That means that you must be the source of the magic. So I think she was the source. If she was not magic itself, she was the source of all the magic within the Nine Realms. And that makes her incredibly powerful, in my opinion. Now we're going to talk about, of course, her as being one of the goddesses of both war and death. Okay, in war, typically you would probably be dedicated more towards Odin, but you could be a warrior of Freya as well. Freya was very, very warlike goddess. That's the Uttengard coming out of her. She was a wild, ferocious fighter, and if you were of the nature there, you would fight with not just like the rage of the berserker, for example, but fight with the rage of just pure rage, literally. Then, of pure destructive capacity. Then you could be definitely a warrior of Freya. The warriors of Freya were just as destructive in their nature. Sorry, not just in their not destructive in nature, just as destructive on the battlefield, and disruptive as the warriors of Odin, for example. It's just they focus their rage or their Uttengard essentially in a different manner to the ones that Odin did. Now, regards her as the that's really all I've got to say about war. But regards her being the goddess of death, or one of the goddesses of death, some people describe her as the queen of the Valkyrie. That's wrong. It comes from Victorian times. Valkyrie were shamanistic projections of Odin. She had nothing to do with Odin. She was not a Valkyrie. Okay, she may have come and collected the dead herself, or she may have sent her own shamanistic projections to collect the dead. But she was not a Valkyrie. Okay, she may have looked very similar to a Valkyrie. She did, but she was not a Valkyrie. Okay, she regards the agreement after the war between Aisha and the Vanir, the Aisha-Vanir alliance. Part of that alliance was that she would have first pick of the brave men that died in battle. Okay, and so of all the brave men that died, she would have the first pick of the first 50% of the men that died, and then the rest of them would be for Odin, unless they were proclaimed to Odin, i.e. like a berserker. She would never touch a berserker. A berserker was Odin's man, and that was it. She would never touch them, but she would go after anyone else who was not, owned by Odin. So we say she would take for her own up to 50%, and then the rest of them would go to Odin. Okay, when she took you to Folkvangir, okay, which was called the Meadow of the Dead. Now, what you did in Folkvangir, and possibly also within her palace, whether you were ever allowed in her hall, the Hall of Sesramir, which was on the field of Folkvangir, is unknown. It is unknown what she did with the men that she collected. However, obviously being the goddess of sex, there was probably a lot of promiscuity, so we say. The goddesses had no problem having sex with mortal men, or the souls of mortal men as they would be, obviously in the heavens. They had no problem whatsoever having orgies and fun like that. So she probably would have had her fun with the men that she wanted to have her fun with. But the men were there for more than just sex. They were there because of Ragnarok. She, just like Odin, was aware that Ragnarok was unavoidable. Ragnarok was fearful for his own death. Odin didn't want to die to Fenrir, and Odin believed he could change Ragnarok, or at the very least slow it down. And he did everything he could to do that, using his practice of Seder magic and everything like this. Now, not once did Freya ever try to slow down or stop Ragnarok. I think it's because she realised it was inevitable. It was such a strong destiny. You can't avoid the unavoidable. So she never used her stronger abilities that she would have possessed over Odin to try and influence Ragnarok in any way whatsoever. However, she did have an army, just like Odin did, that helped protect Asgard against the invasion that occurred during Ragnarok from the giants and from the dead from Helheim. Okay, and at the forefront of the assault would have been the berserkers of Odin. These were, bloodthirsty fighters who were very skillful, very tough, almost unbeatable. And you can imagine after an eons of fighting, how well practiced they would be at killing. They would be unbelievably strong, and well fed, and all the rest of it. These guys were the frontal assault. These guys attacked directly the forces of the giants, and they did their damage as well. During Ragnarok, the berserkers would have done their damage, or will do their damage. There will be fearsome opponents, but the men who were chosen by Freya instead would have been trained I believe, as guardians, because in any war or any fight or any battle, whatever, you need not just an assault, but you also need a defensive line also. And so I believe that it was her responsibility to train the men that she took, who were the bravest of all the men. Essentially, she picked the first 50%, and she would have picked them possibly for one quality or another. Maybe not for their ferocity, which is what Odin picked you for, your ferocity in battle, but for your bravery and for your loyalty and for your unquestionable, like, unwavering nature. Okay. And she would have picked you because you would have made the perfect guardian, and she would have trained you, or had you trained, to become a guardian of Asgard, and you would have protected Asgard after the berserkers had done their damage and the giants came in after killing Odin, and that you would have protected not only Freya but Asgard itself, because of course Freya survived Ragnarok. She was one of the few goddesses or gods to survive Ragnarok, and she survived possibly to help guide the next generation and rebuild. And the men that she took into, to protect her, obviously succeeded in doing so. Whether that was through a magic or not is another matter. But she succeeded in surviving Ragnarok. And that's my last and final words about Freya. And I really, really do hope you enjoyed the video. Now, 2 years ago, I died at the age of 28. I did tell you at the beginning of the video, I'd tell you why she's my patron. And I'm rushing because I'm running out of time, because I know my video is about to cut it. But 2 years ago, I died. And when I died, I went to the Meadow of the Dead. At the time, I didn't know it was the Meadow of the Dead, Folkvangr. I had no idea. I wasn't pagan. Later on, I found out it was Folkvangr. I found out I was, when I became pagan. And I remembered the meadow. I remembered the palace. I always forget the name of the palace. But anyway, it doesn't really matter. Sesfrimir. And I remember Folkvangr. I remember the streams. I remember the grass, and I remember feeling peace and tranquility. And I remember leaving there. I remember leaving out of love for my girlfriend. I went back to the chaos of Midgard. I went back to the pain that I was going to be feeling from my injuries from the car crash, from the heart failure that I had, from the wounds to the back of my head that I had. I went back to that to be with the one that I love. And I think it was Freya that allowed me to do so, because of course she is the goddess of love. And I think she would have seen that my love for my girlfriend is as pure as it is, and she would have allowed me to leave. She would have let me leave Folkvangr until my time comes again to die. And at that point, I will stay. I can't imagine I'll come back again. Dying once is enough. But if I die twice and I come back a second time, it would be for someone I would love again. A daughter, perhaps, or a son. It would take something immense for me to want to go through the pain that I went through again. But my girlfriend was more than worth the pain. And I will protect her, and I will be her guardian, as I would have been, obviously, Freya's in the next world. And when I die and I do go back to Folkvangr, I will be Freya's guardian and her sentinel, and I will protect her with every ounce of fury and strength and power and courage and everything that I have. And that's why she's my patron goddess. Thank you for watching, guys. I appreciate it. Goodbye.